What is up, guys? Alex here from technoclass.com, coming to you with a full review of the Microsoft Lumia 950. This is their co-flagship. The other flagship is the 950 XL, a bigger with a octa-core processor. This has a hexa-core Snapdragon 808, but this is a quad HD display, a very nice quad HD display. 3 gigs of RAM and stuff like that. This is priced at $28,990 and runs Windows 10 Mobile. But is Windows 10 Mobile for you? That's what we're going to answer today in our review. Alright guys, let's get down to brass tacks because we have a lot to talk about. The Microsoft Lumia 950 has a 5.2-inch Quad HD IPS display. As you can see, there is the ambient display as well. It runs Windows 10 OS, Windows 10 Mobile OS, and it is a new version of the Windows OS. By the way, I'm recording this on a Lumia 1020 with Windows Phone 8.1, so I know the difference. There are a little bit of differences, but usually the interface is still the same.
Now looking at the phone itself, it looks pretty standard. It looks like a brick phone, you know, a rectangular box. But there's no distinguishing features, like there's no signature look to it, as opposed to previous Lumias from before. A lot of people consider that to make the phone a little boring and drab, and that would be our opinion as well. Because our Lumia 1020 had an interesting design, the Lumia 950 is, you know, uninspired, and there's some flex here on the back. Still, it's pretty solid. You know, if you drop it, it probably won't shatter like other phones do, but it's definitely not the most interesting design out there.
Alright, now we're taking a look at Windows 10 Mobile running on the Microsoft Lumia 950. And it reminds us of previous Windows phones from before, Windows Phone 7, Windows Phone 8, 8.1, because it is still the live tile interface on the left side, and if you swipe to the right, you get the full list of apps. Now, I do have to mention, this is a little bit slower than the Windows 8.1 we're using right now, which is the Lumia 1020. As you can see, the swiping is just, you know, it just takes a little bit longer, and there are some frame skips when you swipe around, and I don't really understand why, because our Lumia 1020 had this thing pat. There's no issues with the lag on the Lumia 1020 with this and other Windows phones, but this thing, you know, does kind of lag a little bit. Alright, so I suppose we have to stress what version of phone we're running at here. The OS build is 10.0.1005.86.107, and actually it has been through several updates so far. And actually, some of the bugs that we've noticed earlier is no longer present. So that's a good thing. Still, you know, they're still getting that not so smooth swiping around on the main area screen here. As you can see, I'm swiping, and sometimes it takes a little bit, half a second before it actually registers to swipe up or down. And that's not something we notice from our other Windows phones. Now, as far as the overall feature set of Windows Phone 10 or Windows 10 Mobile, it's still lacking compared to the Android and iOS counterparts. It's still very hard to Bluetooth files to certain phones, particularly ones that you didn't pair to before. Kind of a weird thing there. You know, file system and stuff like that are still a pain. And the number one thing I don't like is the limited amount of ways you can customize your home screen. One thing that is really missing from the live tile area here is a bit of a spacer app, and I had to download my own spacer apps on my other Windows phones. I didn't decide to do that here, but you know, that should be a built-in thing where if I can cut this area right here, make another area here, so I know logically where my, you know, messaging apps are, where my games are. Not this whole, you know, box of stuff that is a mishmash of other stuff. One key improvement though is the pull down bar, which has been improved quite a bit. It now looks like Windows PC 10 with all these toggles, which has been a huge pain point for Windows 8.1 users because there wasn't a lot of shortcuts for these. Now they've fixed that a little bit, still lacking though. Alright, so as far as the web browser is concerned, we're using Microsoft Edge now. This is a new web browser from Microsoft, and it actually is a very good web browser that we would compare to, you know, similar to the original Internet Explorer of Windows Phone from before. Keyboard is still the excellent one from Windows Phone, and it's still quite excellent today. One cool new feature is Windows Hello that looks for your retina and reads it. As you can see, looking for you. I can't do it right now, but it does read your retina and actually is kind of like a replacement for fingerprint sensors in other devices. It's not 100% accurate, and you do have to stare at your screen in an awkward angle, kind of too close to it. And sometimes, unlocking your phone usually isn't that hard with a pin, especially. But that's kind of a nice biometric feature from Microsoft there. Finally, the last feature that I can't show you right now is the Windows Continuum feature, which uses the USB Type-C connector here on the bottom. You need a Microsoft display dock, which costs about $100 or about 3,000 pesos. And it connects to your monitor, and now you will have a PC-like interface on your monitor with mouse and keyboard support. I believe you can do that with Miracast. I don't know how the mouse and keyboard would work with that though. Theoretically, you can probably work, with Microsoft Outlook, Express, and Word and stuff like that built in from the phone towards the monitor, which is great for productivity. Although most people I know will probably bring their laptops. The only time I think people will use that is if you're a light traveler and you go to a hotel, you don't have your laptop with you. Just stick it in your display dock, and now you're able to work. Although, like I said, you will need the extra keyboard and mouse. One thing they have improved with Windows 10 Mobile is the background sync for a lot of social media apps and email. There was a time with, for example, my Lumia 1020 with a Windows Phone 8.1, apps like Twitter and the Instagram beta and Facebook wouldn't sync in the background, which means I have to click on the app itself before I get my notifications, which means you've already missed them 3 hours ago. These days with the Windows 10 Mobile, they sync in the background now, and now you get your Twitter mentions, your Facebook tags and stuff like that real time, just like iOS and Android. Unfortunately, it only brings it on par with iOS and Android. But if you're a Windows Phone user, that is a godsend. Which now brings us to the Windows Phone Store with the hamburger menus on the left side. They've changed that quite a bit. It's still terrible. The app gap is horrible, and it's gotten worse. As you can see, I can't even update my Windows camera for some reason. The installing, managing your apps, and the web interface for looking for finding your apps is still terrible. Just like Windows Phone 7 and Windows Phone 8.1, it's very hard to find the app that you want. It's very hard to install them, let alone use them. And of course, most of the apps are still really not so polished versions of the Android and iOS versions, if they actually exist on the Windows platform as at all. A lot of for example here, picks for you a flashlight app. That's one of the top picks of apps here. That's how bad the app situation is on Windows Phone, that the number one pick for me is a flashlight app. That should be built in to the phone. Thankfully, for people who are looking for an awesome camera on their Windows Phone, this guy will not disappoint. This is one of the best cameras on a Windows Phone I've ever tried, and will definitely go up against even the best from Android and iOS. This has a 20 megapixel 1/2.4-inch sensor, larger than the Galaxy S6, larger than the LG G4 and the V10. So the quality on this guy is really, really good. And even on low light, it churns out some pretty good shots. And the 4K video is amazing, super duper crisp, especially if you got it in good lighting. Unfortunately, the image stabilization is not as good as my Lumia 1020. That's given because of the size of the camera module here. It's not as big as the 1020, but it does a job for most people. You just can't use it professionally as much as I can, I can use the 1020. One thing I can say though, the 4K video recording does make the phone overheat, and at some point back in 5 updates ago, it would regularly crash my phone and would not record 4K video. But these days, the only problem is the overheating. Alright guys, so now we're moving on to the gaming performance of the Microsoft Lumia 950 with 3 gigs of RAM and running on the Snapdragon 808 hexa-core processor. This game is Modern Combat 5, and as you can see, there are some frame skips on this thing. Given that I think the game itself is not as optimized for the Snapdragon 808, as you can see, there are quite a bit of frame skips here on the shooting. We're gonna try another game here, but unfortunately, it's kind of not so good here on the on Modern Combat 5. All right, we're back, and now we're playing Asphalt 8, a pretty demanding game, although has been around for a while now, and we're playing this right now. I do notice some frame skips. It's still playable, though I wouldn't expect this kind of performance on a Snapdragon 808. On Android devices, this would be destroying this game quite a bit, but on the Lumia 950, performance in gaming seems to be a little, lacking. There you go. There's some frame skips there. I got an achievement apparently. Maybe that's what made our game skip. There you go. There's some frame skips there. That's very noticeable. Although I have to admit it's still playable. So there you go. I think the optimization here, when it comes to the actual OS itself, Microsoft's own Windows 10 mobile OS, I think needs some optimizations because I believe on Windows 8.1 this runs pretty smoothly. So maybe it's an optimization thing on the software side. But yeah, this is still playable. Of course, I have to mention that this is running on the Quad HD resolution that the display is running. By the way, this is getting kind of warm. So if you're somebody who do not want their phones kind of getting warm, and I've only been playing for like 5 minutes so far, maybe even three, and this has gotten, the usual amount of warmth I would get from a phone that I've been playing on for maybe 40 minutes. I don't know if I can recommend this for gamers when it comes to, people who want their phones not to get really warm. Thankfully, everything else seems to be handling itself fine when it comes to calls, texts, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, except for the fact that you need to pair the devices first before you transfer files to any Bluetooth device. But I digress. Performance-wise, call quality, text, and the antennas are working pretty good. Battery life is pretty average though, given that, like I said, it does seem to, strain the processor quite a bit with the heat. Maybe that's, getting our battery used up a little bit more, which gives us, about a day average battery life. All right, guys, so I think that's about it for the Microsoft Lumia 950 review. And, this thing is very polarizing. I want to like it so much because of the camera. I love the camera. I've been using it to shoot 4K unboxings and reviews so far. I'm really sad that I'm going to have to return it now. But as a phone, it's not, it's not the best, or it's not without flaws. The pros and cons, you're getting an excellent camera. The background app syncing now is on par with Android and iOS. If you're a Windows Phone user, you know what I'm talking about. And Continuum feature is nice for some users, but needs a dock or needs a Miracast display, which probably needs you to have a Bluetooth keyboard and mouse. And those are the only pros that I found, although some of them are pretty good if you're a Windows Phone user. The cons here are the uninspiring design. This is kind of like a plastic fantastic phone. It won't break. There's no creaking, but there is some flex with the plastic here, and there's no metal parts here. It overheats when shooting 4K. It overheats when playing games. Not, I wouldn't say overheat so much, more like getting warm. But it definitely stops recording 4K when it shoots over 10 minutes of it. UI is slower than before, which is kind of a weird thing. I'm using a Lumia 1020. I know how smooth Windows Phone 8.1 is, and the swiping around here is not as smooth as my 1020, which is kind of odd. Features are still lacking. They promised a lot with Windows 10 Mobile, but there's still a lot of features. I want to divide my, live tiles with a space, give me a logical, rest for my eyes, and, maybe labels and stuff like that. And of course, the Bluetooth sending files is still kind of annoying, but, it's Windows Phone. It's never been that easy to get those features. there's still really bad app support. Hopefully they fix that with with the universal apps coming with Windows 10. But for now, I don't think we should expect a lot of apps. And if you're not a huge app downloader, I think it's fine. My Windows my Lumia 1020 does not have a lot of apps on it. I just need it for my camera. Um, there's the gaming performance as well is not as high as it should be. This is a Snapdragon 808 processor hexa-core, and on Android side, the 808 really has a strong performance, but on the Lumia 950, it seems not so high in performance here for some reason. Given these drawbacks, it's hard to understand why it's asking for a price of 28,990 pesos when you can get a lot of flagships in the other OS space, in the other ecosystems for the same price, and doesn't have any of these problems, can take relatively good pictures as well, and has a plethora of apps and features. This is definitely something that a Windows Phone fan would love, but not somebody from the Android or iOS space. So what's the verdict on the Microsoft Lumia 950? Well, it's kind of an interesting phone. If you don't play a lot of games, if you don't need a lot of third-party apps, you just need the basic functionality of a smartphone, calendar, email, some productivity like editing documents, and maybe a light social media here and there, call and text. The Lumia 950 and the Windows 10 Mobile OS does a good job, though the packaging is unmemorable. The camera is really, really excellent, despite the 4K, overheating. But, you're getting an excellent camera with Microsoft's trademark functionality. With if you need Continuum or if you need Microsoft Office and Microsoft's cloud services, this would be a good phone for that. So there you go. That's it for my review of the Microsoft Lumia 950. Alex from technoclass.com here. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.